And welcome into the Skol Purple Podcast. We are audio only, as you can tell here tonight, as we are going to hopefully soon be joined by our guest who is going to be joining us, Lions Fan Report from Twitter, Lions Fan Report, as he will be giving us his thoughts on this Vikings-Lions matchup that will be taking place on Sunday over in Detroit, and the favored Detroit Lions, favored by 2.5 last I've heard. I don't know if the numbers have gone up. Let's take a look as I say that. Very good podcasting here.
Well, I might be able to beat you to it.
You might beat me to it. All right, go for it.
Yeah, I might be able to beat you to it here. So it looks like currently we've got a line here of, it's actually gone down just a little bit. Detroit is favored by 2, and our over and under is 51.5. So how about that? Yeah, so
All
2
right.
down from 2.5.
All right, very good. Well, that is going to get us in to our guest here momentarily, Lions Fan Report, right after this, coming up on the Skol Purple Podcast.
The Minnesota Vikings have brought joy and misery to the Vikings fans for many years. At the Skol Purple Podcast, we just want to see the Vikings party with the Lombardi. Join us for analysis, interviews, laughs, and much more. It's the podcast by Vikings fans, for Vikings fans. The Skol Purple Podcast starts now.
And here we go. We are joined by Andrew of Lions Fan Report on Twitter. Andrew, how are you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing good. Thanks again for having me on. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You sound wonderful.
Awesome. Glad to hear it.
Yes, we're glad to have you on because we've got a pretty big matchup, really, for both teams, to be honest, which, boy, if you would have told me that at the beginning of the season, I would have said you're crazy that this is going to be a big game for both teams. But here we are. The Lions are still fighting for their postseason lives, and, you know, it may not happen, but they definitely have to win on Sunday to probably stay alive, honestly, but they've got a chance, and they've been playing some really good football. How are things over in Detroit? Are they pretty exciting to see this team kind of turn around a little bit the last month of the season or so?
Oh, yeah, it's been a complete 180. And, last time we talked, it was obviously the last game against the Vikings. It was heartbreak for the Detroit Lions fans, and then we kind of went on a pretty big losing streak. So for us to finally find our footing and get some wins back-to-back now and be playing our best football in November and December, which is something that as a Lions football team we haven't done in years now. I think optimism right now is at an all-time high, and this is going to be one of those games where I think if the Lions are able to somehow find a way to win that, it'll show to the national media and just everyone out there that this team is finally for real.
Well, yeah, and the Lions, I think a lot of people a lot of Vikings fans, I think, are underestimating the Lions, and maybe there is some lack of respect for the Vikings because they're 10-2. But the Lions have been playing good football as of late, and they almost beat the Bills on Thanksgiving. By the way, one bad play call or one executed throw, depending on your point of view, away from potentially sealing that game against Buffalo. Or at least making Buffalo have to go down and score a touchdown to beat you or to tie you in that game. So really very close to being 5-0 over your last 5 games. This team, do you think it's a little bit too favorable that the Lions are favored by 2 points going into this matchup?
I mean, when I first saw that, I was actually a little bit surprised myself. But the more I think about it, especially, I think the big thing in this one is the fact that it's a home game for the Detroit Lions, and there's no doubt that Jared Goff plays his best football at home in that Lions dome. So I think just all that momentum, the fact we've won four out of the last 5, it's a home game. I mean, in all reality, only lost to the Vikings because of that final play. So I think all things considered, I shocked a little bit that the Lions were favored? Yeah, but at the same time, the more I give thought when I think about it, it makes a lot of sense, and I think this Lions team is definitely a little underrated. But at the same time, I think the more I read and see things online, I think they're slowly but surely starting to gain that respect, which I think they do deserve.
Tony, where do you fall on this? Are you kind of where Andrew is, or are you kind of more on the lines of this is just plain disrespect that the media in Vegas is paying the Minnesota Vikings? But last time we saw the Vikings be be dogs at home, they ended up getting throttled by the Dallas Cowboys. So now they're dogs on the road. What are your thoughts, Tony?
Yeah, hi Andrew. By the way, I'm Steggy.
Yeah.
So
I should introduce you.
that's all right. That's all right. It's probably better this way because you don't have to see my face. It's better for the audience. But no, I have really 2 points, and Carson touched on one already. I was very perplexed going into that Cowboys game because I'm thinking, they just got beat by the Packers. The Vikings were just coming off this big win from Buffalo, but there are teams that are just good fits to beat other teams, and certainly timing plays a factor in that as well. And no, I'm with you guys. I mean, at face value, I was a little surprised. The Vikings did actually open as I think 2-point favorites in this game, and then slowly that line has moved. I'm sure it's moved a bit, and I'm sure we'll get into this a bit more, but because of some injuries we've had, especially in our secondary now. But just looking at the matchup, I'm worried. I mean, I'm definitely worried as a Vikings fan. If I were betting Steggy dollars, I may be inclined to take Detroit this weekend because I really do think they're going to match up well against the Vikings. And at the end of the day, Detroit knows how to scrap, and they've been fighting for wins this whole year. And finally, they're starting to get them and be the team that I personally thought they would be this year. And I think the Vikings, not to take anything away from our favorite ball club, Carson, is that they've won a lot of games, but they haven't had to face as much adversity. I mean, we talked about the Dallas game, but we're talking about 2 losses, right? And so I just think the Lions are built to really fight in this game, and I think they're gonna have a day. I don't know if it's gonna be 40-14 like they just put up against the Jags. But I do think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I don't even care what the over and under is. I think it's 51.5. I think you take the over. If it was 60, I might take the over.
And that is correct, Mr. Schubert, that there is no video tonight. It is an audio-only show. As per request from our guest here today, he likes to keep his identity his face off of the internet. We can't just be graced by his beauty like that,
Well,
So.
Carson, don't play coy. It's really the fans that have requested it from us. So.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But no, yeah, I'm kind of on both of your guys' side here, where I think it's not a big deal. First of all, I don't think it's a big deal. There's so many Vikings fans that are just going nuts right now on Twitter that it's like, and probably other social media, like, oh, well, the Vikings are just being disrespected by the entire country. Good. Let them disrespect us. I don't care. Go out and prove them wrong, Like that's my mentality. Um I just don't get why people have to be upset with that. Who cares? We know the Vikings have choked before multiple times in multiple ways, in every way pretty much possible. Anyways, I think we just need to go prove people wrong. And honestly, I'm still somewhat of a doubter. I don't think this team is going to go very far in the postseason. Maybe I think they win their first round, but then I think they could very easily lose in the second round, especially depending on if it's the Dallas Cowboys or San Francisco 49ers that end up being the opponent. But so yeah, I don't think it's that big of a deal that the Vikings are underdogs in this game. Like, let's just calm down. Who cares? Go and win, even though I do predict the Lions will win this game. Just try and shush the doubters this week, like you were unable to do against Dallas. So that's my mindset in this game from a Vikings fan perspective. But there's been plenty of, oh, woe is me. Why are we
Well,
not as good as? Why are we not being respected?
I have a good question for Andrew before we dive into the game, because this is something I've got. One of my best friends is a Lions fan, and we've had this conversation before, but I'd like to hear your take. I talk a lot, and so does Carson, and he brought it up here just a second ago about some of the woes, right? Some of the ball club woes that certainly the Vikings have had over the years, and we like to complain a lot, and some of it's certainly warranted, right? You talk about '09, depending on how old you are. I'm old, so I was around for the '98 season, the '01 41 donut, certainly 2009. But the response I get from my very good friend, who's from the Detroit area, is we kind of wish we had the same problems that you guys had. So I don't get a lot of like sympathy from a friend of mine. So as a Lions fan, when you hear Vikings fans kind of complaining, if you will, is that a shared sentiment where you're like, hey, we're with you, we feel the pain, or are you kind of like, hey, dudes, like, we would just like to be in the playoffs more often. We don't really we haven't moved on to the like championships or anything like that yet. Because certainly that's what we're still looking for. And I don't know, what's your take on that?
Yeah, here's how I'll answer that, Tony. I am 24 years old. I was born in 1998, so a little bit younger. And whenever I hear fans complain about their team's woes, I just have to remind them, like, hey, in the 24 years that I've been alive, this is a Lions football team that has never won a playoff game. And in my head, that is ridiculous. The fact that I've been alive for 24 years now and this team has not gotten one playoff win. So, at least from my perspective, from Lions fans' perspective, yes, we'd love to go compete for championships, but we got to start at step one, which is, hey, let's just win a playoff game, right? So, at least as Vikings fans, you guys have had some playoff wins in recent memories. So I understand the sentiment from Vikings fans, but at the same time, man, 1998 was the last time we won a playoff game. So I don't think it can be any tougher than that as a fan.
So what you're saying is your response is shut the hell up. No, no, I'm just kidding.
Politely shut the hell up.
No, very
Yeah.
good. Very good.
That's a good point. I guess we should be more grateful, but like we said in the intro, we want to party with the Lombardi. We're sick of this. We're gonna be second or third or fourth or whatever, and I'm sure the Lions fans are probably also sick of it. But
Yeah, we just want to get to the playoffs at
20th,
this point.
32nd, whatever it ends up being most of the time for the Lions. But it is, when the Vikings have been so close. I know the Lions haven't maybe been to the level of the Vikings in terms of NFC Championship game, a missed field goal away from being in the Super Bowl or 4 Super Bowl losses. But it's just that the Vikings have been so close so many times, and it's like, gosh, we can't get over the hump. And for the Lions, it's just like we've been so we've been so far away for so many times. Can we just get to the playoffs? I think there is definitely a level of, well, maybe we should just be grateful for what we have, but also like we want more.
Well, and this is
But yeah.
this is what I will say, and I can't speak for Carson here, Andrew, but I like the Lions. Like this is, obviously I'm a Vikings fan first and foremost, but when the Lions are not playing the Vikings, I have zero qualms about cheering for the Lions club. To be
Yeah.
honest, if they made the playoffs and the Vikings aren't in it, I'm a Lions fan, right? Like I will actively cheer for the Lions. I don't know if I can quite say that about the Bears, and I definitely can't say it about the Packers. But I mean, honestly, there have been years where, we've had obviously some just not great years, especially in the early 2000s. I should say the early aughts. 2010, 2011. Um, so. And during those years, I certainly would look to some of the other NFC North teams. So I don't know if that sentiment is shared across teams. I don't know how Lions fans necessarily see Vikings fans. Obviously, they're not going to cheer for them more than their own team, right? But let's say, if the Lions are having a stinker and the Vikings are in the playoffs, and I'm not necessarily saying you personally, but I would say generally even the Vikings fan base is pretty open to and certainly encouraging with the Lions. If the Vikings were out of it and the Lions were in it, like I said, I'm a Lions fan for you guys. Certainly in the NFC, just like in the AFC, my non-Vikings team would probably be the Bills. Even though they've been playing great, I still love the Bills because they're looking for a championship. But yeah, how would you say the Detroit Lions sentiment is towards the Vikings? And again, you don't need to sugarcoat it. Maybe you're like, dude, we think you guys are a bunch of turds. That's totally okay. I'm open to it.
No, I think it's I think what you said is pretty accurate for the most part. And for me personally, I went to Michigan State University, so I'm a huge Kirk Cousins fan. So that's part of the reason why it makes it a little bit easier for me to root for the Vikings when we're not playing you guys. Is I'm a huge Kirk Cousins fan. But I think overall, yeah, I think for the most part, Lions fans, at least when it comes up to like Twitter, for example, I think for the most part, kind of like what you said, like when we're not playing each other, there's kind of a mutual respect between the Vikings and Lions fans. And at the end of the day, I think we can all rally around the idea that we do not like the Green Bay Packers. They can lose, and we'll be happy.
Amen.
So as long as the Packers are losing, I'm more than happy to root for the Vikings.
Yeah, we can all stand in solidarity in our hatred for the Packers.
That is correct. That is correct. And you know what? That also unites us and Bears fans. All like everybody except Packers fans in the NFC North, obviously. So we've all got that going for us. So that is
it's been fun watching them fizzle this year. I think all
Oh
of
yeah.
us in the NFC North are certainly like, please bring on the Jordan Love era. I don't care that he made one good pass. I don't know if any of you have seen that on
yeah.
Packers Twitter or TikTok
Oh yeah,
or any
dump
of
Aaron
that.
Oh yeah, it's
Rodgers.
all over.
Yeah, he makes one good throw and they're like, "Oh, everybody's shaking in their boots," and it's like, nah, like, every NFL court, like Sean Mannion can have a good pass every once in a while,
That's saying
so
something too.
exactly.
that is saying something. That is.
Yeah,
Oh
so we'll
man.
certainly see. I mean, I think it'll be. I'm really excited for what the division's going to look like in the next 2 to 3 years. And if I was a Lions fan in particular, and I would say even the Bears a bit of what they've shown, you got to be excited. The way I look at it is that Green Bay has, I think, officially, especially if Rodgers retires after the season, which there has been some speculation he's going to do. I see the Packers kind of heading off into the sunset of their prime because this sustainability of Hall of Fame quarterback play just can't keep up. But let's hope not for all of our sakes. But then I see the Vikings kind of being at the top, but their window is also, and again, I hate to say this, their window is also getting near the end. I mean, unless they start to somehow load up on young talent, which we've talked about on this show, I don't necessarily see yet. And then I see the two teams, the Lions in particular, as kind of these surging young ball clubs. So I don't know. I think in the next 2 to 3 years, we're going to see a big shift in the powers in the NFC North.
Andrew, Andrew, who did you say you were a big fan of?
Kirk Cousins.
You like that? You like that?
I've got to get the you like that in there.
You like that?
But yes, he's a very how do I want to phrase this? A very interesting subject when it comes to Vikings fans. But I go ahead and finish what you're going to say, and then I've got a question for you before we get into this game.
Yeah, I was just going to quickly build off of Tony's point about the division as a whole. I really do think that the NFC North these next 2, 3 years is going to be really competitive, especially when you look at the Bears. Justin Fields slowly starting to improve. They got all that cap room. They got that first round draft pick back. Obviously, the Lions, I think that we're at a really good point right now with a lot of our young players. I think we're only going to improve moving forward. And then you look at the Vikings. I think obviously their window might be a little bit shorter, but I still think there's talent on that team. And even the Packers, like, who knows what Jordan Love is going to be? There's a lot of coaching issues. I think they still do have some talent. So I really do think that the NFC North as a whole over these next few seasons is going to be probably one of the better divisions in football at some point.
Agreed.
It's going to be interesting. I don't know if I'm ready to say it will be one of the better ones, just because I think this offseason is going to tell us a lot about this division over the next few years, this offseason in particular. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. The Vikings are going to have to make some very, 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 very tough and big decisions this offseason in regards to older talent that they have on this team. So, but Tony, I wanted to ask you, so we heard your overall perception of the Vikings just from a Lions fan, but now I want to hear your perspective as a Lions fan on the 2022 Minnesota Vikings. Is there something to be said about this Vikings team being 10-2, or are they frauds? That's the big question over the last few weeks. Are the Vikings frauds? What do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's interesting even hearing from other Vikings fans because I hear some fans saying like, "Hey, this is the record is legit, like we are as good as our record," and then there's the others saying like, "No, we've gotten lucky." But I was listening to like a Jared Goff interview, and he was talking about those close wins, not just for the Vikings, but just from his experience winning close games. And he said something along the lines of like, at the end of the day, a win is a win in this league, and even if you're winning ugly wins and they might be in the fourth quarter, at the end of the day, good teams find a way to win. So although the record and these close games, the Vikings may have gotten lucky on the outside, at the end of the day, like that's what good teams do. And that's like the Lions, for example, when we went on our 6 game losing streak, like we were losing one score games as well. We just weren't finding a way to finish them like the Vikings were. So I do think that there's still a lot for the Vikings to prove, especially compared to maybe like a team like the Eagles, and maybe, any of the other, really good NFC North or NFC teams. But at the end of the day, even if they're close football games, ultimately at the end of the day, good teams find ways to win, and the Vikings are finding ways to win. And as a Lions fan, I have to respect that. And I think you guys are still a really good football team, even if it's close games.
All right. Well, we've spent over 20 minutes talking about non-Vikings-Lions game coming up here, which is good because it's good to have these conversations. And it's to me, it's interesting. I think to Tony it is as well, just hearing the national perspective or the divisional perspective, if you will, on what people think of the Vikings. We know Packer fans don't think the Vikings are worth a darn, so just kind of interested to hear your thoughts, or at least most Packer fans. But I think they they have some other issues to work out. But let's dive into the biggest storyline, I think, and that is the Mike Hughes revenge game coming up. No, the T.J. Hockenson revenge game that's coming up for the Vikings and the Lions. Obviously, traded him away before the deadline. Believe it was a second and a third round pick that you guys got in return, and then the Vikings also got a fourth and a sixth, or was it a couple fourths? I can't remember how that ended up being, but it was a. It sounded like the Vikings got a pretty good deal out of that because they got an upgrade at a position they desperately needed to upgrade, and they were able to get some picks back. They basically just traded down, really. And I guess we never had a chance to talk, Andrew, but what was your takeaway from that move for both teams when it happened, and what do you think about it here in Week 14?
Yeah, so I think at the end of the day, the Lions were never. T.J. Hockenson was never in the long-term picture for this football team. They weren't going to re-sign him. So I think the trading T.J. Hockenson was the right move for the Detroit Lions. The only problem that I had, and other Lions fans might disagree with me, was the fact that we traded them obviously to a division rival, which is the best team in our division right now. When you're a Lions football team that's trying to make the playoffs, when you're a Lions team that hopefully next year you're trying to compete for the division. So was trading TJ Hockenson the right move, just given the fact we weren't going to pay him, given the fact that we don't use our tight ends in the passing game on offense that much? Yes. But at the same time, if you want to compete for the division and you're expecting as a Lions fan that we're competing next year, why did you just go and make the best team in the NFC North that much better? That was the only issue I had. So I think in terms of how we're building this roster was the right move. I can't wrap my head around the fact that we traded Hockenson to the Minnesota Vikings.
Yeah, no, I mean that makes total sense. I mean that was kind of my thought, to be honest with you, when I first saw the trade come through as a Vikings fan. That's what I was most surprised about as well. I think the capital seemed pretty fair for either side. But yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. The biggest surprise to me was just like, this is a guy that certainly I think you guys would have liked to see more out of him in the last, couple of years. Um, but at the same time, it was, it was one of those things where he was obviously a talent. So yeah, it was just like you're going to trade this guy inter division. To be honest with you, it was kind of like when the Vikings traded with you guys in the draft,
Yeah,
just in the reverse way,
Yeah.
where I'm going like, what are we doing?
Why are we giving them a franchise receiver?
Yeah, but no,
I was happy
I'm
about that.
certainly. I love Hawk. I think he's a great fit here in Minnesota. I think if we can keep him around, which I think they will, going into next year and going forward, I definitely see that being a large possibility. And yeah, he might be a thorn on your side for a few years to come. But we just touched on it with the draft. I mean, we'll certainly see how this rookie receiver is going to be for you guys, and we could be, eating crow too on our end because of that draft trade.
There's a lot of revenge games. I mean, let's be honest here. We got, like I said, the Mike Hughes revenge game. We also have the T.J. Hockenson revenge game. We also have, what was the other one I was just thinking of for you guys? Can't think of it.
It
Go ahead.
escapes me as well. I can only think of Mike Hughes and
I thought there was one
moment.
other guy.
Well, what about the guy? What about David Blau? It's the Blau revenge game.
There we go. There it is.
That's right. Well, and I guess it's a Jameson Williams revenge game. How dare you trade me to a division rival because you don't think I'm going to be good enough or whatever.
It's going to be a practice squad duel with David Blau.
Hey, let's hope that he isn't playing tomorrow on Sunday for your guys' sake, or something horribly went wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
He would have had to surpass Nick Mullins on the depth chart, or Nick Mullins would have had to get hurt. Good thing it's not Baker Mayfield. The
Well,
Rams have that mess to deal with. So
you never know, Carson. He could have diarrhea like the rest of our team. I don't know if you guys have seen the injury report, but the
Yep.
Vikings have, I think, like 5 or 6 players that showed up either I think it was on yesterday's report with, of course they're not going to say what it is, but illness. I just choose to think it's diarrhea because it's more fun for me and I'm a child. But yeah, something's going on, and I noticed the line moved a little bit. So, Vegas knows something. That's all I'm saying.
What was interesting is the Lions also had 4 or 5 players show up this week with illness as well. So something's going around in the league right now. It's not just the Vikings and Lions. Something's going
Yes.
on.
It's bad Chipotle. It was bad Chipotle.
That's
what
right.
happened.
Vegas is messing with the Chipotle.
Well, actually, now that I think about it, guys, the Enchilito just came back at Taco Bell. So, I mean, there is that. There is that.
That settles it. We know what it is.
Enchilitos all around.
But yeah, so I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this game. So we know what both of these teams have, but it seems like the Lions have grown in their confidence level in themselves, and maybe Dan Campbell has also grown in his confidence level as a coach over these last 5 weeks. Andrew, what would you say to that, and what would you say to this team potentially, if everything panned out, potentially getting to the postseason? I know that's a very high, lofty goal with the record the way it is right now, but how do you feel about all of those things?
Well, here's my coach speak answer to the playoff question. One game at a time. I'm just focused on the Vikings game. Whatever falls in
Thanks,
place
Dan.
after that happens after that. But I think when in terms of the game though, this Lions football team, the team you guys faced week 3 when we played you at your turf, it's a completely different football team now. Like we have really improved, especially on the defensive side of the football. And I think one thing, even as Lions fans, because we were really upset with our defensive performance early on in this season. But the reality of the situation is we had so many young players starting on our defense, new faces learning a new scheme, guys that have never, played an NFL snap before, that there were going to be some growing pains early on. It was something I had talked about with other Lions fans before even the start of the season was like, hey, we can't expect our defense to be great game 1 just because the fact that these guys are still learning a new system. We got rookies that have never played before. So I think that has been the biggest change from when we played you guys originally, was just our defense has gotten so much better. We're consistently creating pressure. We're doing a really great job in coverage. Our cornerbacks are playing really well. And I think the biggest thing is the key difference is communication on the back end. I think these guys have really grown in this system, and there aren't issues where I'm looking at the TV and I'm seeing, the safety and cornerback looking at each other like, hey, what the heck did you just do? Like they're playing as one unit right now. They're playing off of each other. And like you said, Carson, they're extremely confident right now. And I think that the NFL in general is a lot of momentum and confidence. And I think the Lions are trending up and they're trending in the right direction at the right time. So I think our defensively, I think it's maybe an area where we're not getting as much love as we probably should. And that's probably been the biggest change from when we played you guys last.
Before I let Tony in with a question here, do you feel like Dan Campbell's coaching over the last 5 weeks has improved in situational football types of situations where we know the Vikings have just been absolutely masters, obviously situational master meetings on Friday at Egan every week. So, but anyways, where do you think Dan Campbell's coaching in big time situations is compared to the last time these two teams played?
Oh, it is night and day. And I think when you go on a 5-game losing streak like the Lions did, there's always that there there's always a really high chance that the team falls apart, that a coach loses the locker room, especially in year 2 when you have, high expectations of being much improved, right? And the fact that he was able to keep this locker room together, we were able to turn things around coming out of the bye week. now we're playing our best football. That really speaks, I think, to the kind of coach that he is, because I don't think every coach in the NFL could go through that situation where you're just losing game after game after game, and for him to be able to ensure that that locker room stays together, that everyone's confidence is at an all-time high, even when you're losing 5 games in a row. I think that really speaks to the kind of coach that Dan Campbell is. And then to go off your point too about those in-game decisions, and I know this almost kind of sounds mean to say as a Lions fan, but when Campbell just takes a step back and just allows his players to play and doesn't get in the way, good things happen. Like earlier on in the season, he didn't trust his kicker when we were in situations where there was a high percentage field goal chance. He wouldn't put out the kicker. We now have a kicker that can consistently make those kicks. He didn't trust the defense, so he'd go for it on fourth down all the time. And then if you don't convert, now you're putting your defense in an even worse situation. So the fact that he's just kind of stepped out of the way, just trust your players, trust your offense, trust your defense, just let your players play, has really been a huge difference. And yeah, I mean, all in all, like, yeah, it's night and day. The coach Campbell's has kind of grown into over throughout this season.
Yeah, just looking at the stats, your ball club has done. Obviously, we know they've won 4 of the last 5, but just looking at the numbers, offensively, Detroit is averaging just a shade over 28 points a game on offense, and then you're giving up an average again over the last 5 games, just a hair below 20 points. So certainly, I mean, that's a healthy spread. It's not like, they've been eking out some wins. Certainly, that big win against Jacksonville certainly helped those numbers, but you can see it show up in the stats. I'm kind of a nerd, so I'm a little bit of a stat. I don't want to say guru. We'll just leave it at nerd.
Oh,
But
I get
I
you
really,
there.
I really like to dig in, and again, just looking at what you guys have done, it's impressive, and that just lends to the idea. And I know we'll get into this a little further, but certainly not. I don't want to say not excited, but I'm not like foaming at the mouth here as a Vikings fan, going, "Well, there's number 11." I mean, I do think this is going to be a tough game, and I certainly could see the Lions winning this game. But I don't really have a question for you. I guess I'll ask one question, and then we can certainly move on here. Carson touched on this a little bit ago about Dan Campbell, but do you feel like the the addition of the Lions to Hard Knocks was a good representation of your team? Do you think you gained some fans out of that? Do you think it's good for the ball club? Or ultimately, do you feel like it doesn't matter, you're neutral? Or do you feel like it's some sort of negative thing?
I thought it was beneficial for sure, especially as a Lions fan. The more content that I can consume, the better. And I think that everyone kind of got a inside peek into who Dan Campbell is as not only as a coach, but just as a human being. And there were even a lot of things that I learned that I didn't even know about this football team, not just about Dan Campbell, but about other assistant coaches. So I think it was great to see the Lions on Hard Knocks. It was, I mean, to be honest, I'd love to see another Hard Knocks with the Lions. But I think the one area where it was bad was that it created a lot of hype coming into the season, and everyone's expectations went from, hey, we're a 6-7 win football team to now we're a guaranteed playoff win. So when we went on that 6-game losing streak early on in the season, or 5-game losing streak early on in the season after Hard Knocks, that made it a little bit harder because everyone just had their expectations just kind of went through the roof with all the media hype.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. I certainly I watched. I'm a big fan of the show, and again, as a team that I'm a little bit more familiar with, versus like maybe an AFC team that I don't really pay as much attention to. It was really cool to watch, and certainly made me more of a fan of the ball club. I can say personally, I think Dan Campbell's a really kind of a cool coach, and yeah, I mean, but to your point, I mean, I think that's one thing that I looked at it from an outside perspective and went, like, how could this be in some way, shape, or form a negative thing? And I think sometimes you hit it was it can temper, excuse me, it can make it so we don't temper expectations, that they become a little bit more, I don't want to say unreasonable, but just not exactly, realistic, if that makes sense. So, but I thought it was
Well,
good.
100%.
Loved the ball club. I thought it was really neat. I'm gonna get myself a Rodrigo jersey. No, but it was
Hey,
great.
well, hey, if you want to turn in that Vikings fan card, we got some spots on the Lions roster
They were,
or Lions fan base roster if you want to come join us.
there are a few more seats on the bus, is what you're saying.
And the bus ain't stopping, so you better hop on soon.
Well, this is interesting. I'm interested to get both of your guys' thoughts. So, Barstool Sports earlier today, the Vikings may be the worst 10-2 team in the history of the NFL. All you need to do is see the point differential, which is just 10 points. They play close games and have hung on several times. The Lions are surging and trying to make a statement towards next season as they win their 5th game in 6 tries. And then he puts Lions 27, Vikings 17 as his score, the Barstool Sports guy. Any thoughts on that take? Are the Vikings the worst 10-2 team in NFL history? Let's get your thoughts first, Andrew.
Well, hey, I love his prediction. I'll agree with that. Anytime Lions are projected to win, I'm all for it. I mean, I think there is some truth behind it. I think there's still a lot of uh, question marks around the Vikings, given the way they've been winning, that they have to kind of go out and get that statement win still to kind of prove the doubters wrong. But like I said earlier in the show, like at the end of the day, like when you're 10-2, regardless of how you're winning these football games, you're doing something right, right? So like even
Right.
as a Lions fan, I would love for us to be 10-2 and for us to win these late fourth quarter wins. Like it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, a win is a win. They're 10-2. I got to respect that. But I think once you guys get that statement win and actually, go out and blow out a team like kind of like the Lions did against the Jaguars, I think that narrative will slowly to start to go away. But at the end of the day, like you're 10-2. Like I don't think anyone can take that away from you.
Absolutely. Tony, are you
Yeah.
ready to claim the Vikings as the worst 10-2 team in history?
No. And I think this is where, and I try to be pretty realistic. I
Looking
am
for clicks?
I am a homer, but at the same time, yeah, I just think it's a little bit of an overplayed narrative. We've heard this basically ever since, I don't know, probably the bye week in week 7 for the Vikings after we beat Miami, which is like, is this the worst, 5-1 team? And at the end of the day, look, you hit it already, Andrew. You hit it on the head. A win is a win. The other thing is our strength of schedule is pretty tough. So if you really think about it, I believe what was weighted by record, it was the 8th toughest schedule so far played this season. So if you think about it that way, I mean, basically, a lot of these are playoff games. Like they're teams that are at least playoff contenders. And so if you think of it that way, I mean, wouldn't you want your ball club to come out with a win? And certainly, as you mentioned, both of you have mentioned, I would love to have us get, some 40-3 win.
Right.
That would
Right.
be amazing. But at the same time,
Was that a flashback?
yeah, that was, yeah, I had a little
A
PTSD moment.
little
I'm back.
throwback Thursday. Not
I'm back. I'm
not a
back.
good throwback.
But at the end of the day, this team has also, because you really can flip it on its head, right? This team has shown that it can win tough games, it can win close games, and it can be strategic in which the way it does it. Like there have been a lot of late game either adjustments. I think early in the year we saw some fluky things happen. Like, I mean, you can even look at the Buffalo game. I know that was only 4 games ago, but there are some games that are like that where we get some break that just seems to happen. The double doink against New Orleans, you see a lot of those breaks, but there also have been a lot of close wins where we actually made a stand defensively, or or we scored, late a late touchdown to actually win the game. So it's not like we're just backdooring into all of these wins. People also forget that last year, which was by and large almost the same roster, there wasn't that much roster turnover. This team lost as many games, as many one-score games as we've won. And last year we set the record for
Right.
games lost in a one-score fashion. So, I don't know. I'm just saying that the the scales tend to balance. Everything usually comes back to the mean, and so far we've seen that this year.
Absolutely. Well, want to remind people, if you are watching either on Facebook or on Twitter, please go ahead and help us get to our 100th subscriber. We are in the 90s now. Come on, people. We need your help. Help us out, get to that 100 mark. We would love it if you go to Skol Purple Podcast on YouTube, subscribe, and help us get over the 100 mark and keep this show rocking and rolling. But let's go ahead and
we
get.
promise to never show our faces again, if that's what you want.
No
You guys are
promises
scaring
on my
people
end.
away.
Yeah, no promises. No promises. You heard that? Let's put it this way: if you don't get us to 100, you're definitely going to see our faces.
That's right. That's right. Uh, all right, gentlemen. Well, let's move on to the matchups: offense versus defense. Always seems like I like the Vikings offense matching up against anybody else other than the Vikings, more so than I like the Vikings defense matching up against anybody. But let's go ahead and talk about my favorite matchup, even though I will say I am a little bit concerned. You know, this has been maybe not as big of a topic this week, but, you know, with Christian Darrisaw still very likely to be out on Sunday, I think this needs to be a topic because I think that Aiden Hutchinson very well could line up on Blake Brandel or one of your other defensive linemen as well, Andrew. But I'm very worried about an Aiden Hutchinson Blake Brandel matchup on Sunday, which could definitely give the Vikings some trouble in moving the ball.
I didn't even realize that Darrisaw might be out this week, so you just gave me a little bit more optimism for this game. Yeah, I mean that's a huge loss. I think that's like I had mentioned earlier about our defense playing better. I think obviously Aiden Hutchinson has been really solid this year too, but I think we're slowly but surely starting to get a lot of production from our other defensive linemen. And I think we've got a really good rotation now of outside of just Aiden Hutchinson of other players that can get to the quarterback as well. So now we've got this rotation where guys can stay fresh and have, fresh feet when they go in to rush the quarterback. So yeah, I think not having Darrisaw is going to be a huge loss if he isn't able to play. So yeah, I didn't even realize that, but yeah, I'm now big game incoming for Hutchinson. Let's hope.
All right, we got 2 subscribers since we started the show today. Let's go. Love it.
Look at
Love
that.
it.
How about that?
We bring in big guests, and here we are. So let's yeah, I guess that definitely is one of the big talking points in this offense versus defense matchup, Vikings offense versus Lions defense. I think another thing, Mike Hughes being on your team, but I think Mike Hughes is probably, I guess I haven't looked at his PFF numbers or anything, but if I had to guess, he's probably been underwhelming for you guys. Is that pretty accurate, Andrew?
Yeah, he's kind of been up and down throughout the season. I think his best game was against the Buffalo Bills. He had a really good game, but actually we've kind of started to phase him out a bit these
Okay.
last couple of weeks or so. So there's a chance that he might not even play. I don't even think he got many defensive snaps last week. He got a bunch. He was a starter because Okuda was out against the Bills. But we have another cornerback. His name is Jerry Jacobs, who was an undrafted free agent last year, who's kind of taken that next step in his development and now is that outside number 2 outside of Okuda. So I think unless for whatever reason there's an injury to our cornerback room, and I know that Okuda has an illness right now, if he were to miss the game, then Hughes would probably get the start, but he's slowly but surely kind of been phased out, and he's more that rotational cornerback if something goes wrong.
All right. So there is a chance that he might not get much playing time. But yeah, Jeff Okuda you said he's supposed to play this week?
Yeah, I believe so. He showed up on the injury report. I believe it was because of the illness, so I'd expect by Sunday he'll be good to go. So yeah, I anticipate him to play.
And then your other cornerback who loves to hold, can't remember his name, Amani or Water.
Yeah, he's kind of like Mike Hughes, where he's been phased out as well. So That's
Oh,
another reason
dang
why our
it.
defense has improved so much from when we last played you. Is like those are the players that are no longer starting. So we've gotten better. We finally found the guys that are going to come in and play their best football. So they're no longer playing. So that helps us obviously.
So I will say, so the Vikings have not lost a game by one score. So I'm almost tempted to say that Barstool guy could be right. We could be losing by double digits on Sunday if we lose. Otherwise, if the Vikings win, it's going to be another one-score win because that's what 9 out of their 10 wins have been. So those are the rules. I don't write them, and I just have to assume that those will continue to be the rules going forward. But
At some
Yeah,
point, you'd
I
have to
think
think that luck runs out, though, right?
well, I think that's what a lot of people are saying, that the Vikings are frauds because, well, eventually they're gonna not be able to do what they have to do to win in a one-score game, right? But I
Yeah,
don't know.
I think ultimately the thing is I do have some inkling that the Vikings might struggle a bit in this last little bit of the season. Um, and I think they're positioned well enough where certainly they'll still make the playoffs, and I think they'll still be seated, in a decent position. But I do think that they may struggle a bit, and I almost welcome it because I think this team does need to understand how to really dig themselves out of a hole that they don't kind of bail themselves out of at the last second, which again is great for the win column. But ultimately, I do see this Vikings team as a good team. I think that the woes for both the Lions and the Vikings, as good as both of these teams have played over the last 5 weeks, is defense. Defense is the absolute number one issue with both of these ball clubs. And for the Vikings, they have to almost look at the way that Detroit has been able to put together some wins where I think your defense still is obviously has some there's some things that they need to improve upon. And again, I'd say the same thing about my ball club. But the difference is I feel like Detroit has a way to really blow a game open, and the Vikings have the tools to do it, but we just haven't seen them put on the gas for 3 quarters, no less four. What we usually see from Vikings games is we see them hit the gas in the first quarter and then the fourth quarter, and and that has seemed to equal wins, which is great. But having those explosive offenses can make other teams' defenses more one-dimensional because they're continuously playing catch-up, and that's where I think Detroit has found the edge. Where if Detroit can get up big, much like Dallas did against the Vikings, it makes our defense one-dimensional, which already isn't very good, and then they're just going to pick us apart all day. That's what I'm worried about.
So
And that's
I have
exactly how we beat the Jaguars last week. Was we got off to a hot start and just kept the foot on the pedal, did not let off one bit, and the Jaguars defense kind of became one dimensional, and it just got out of hand really early.
Yeah, I think the key to this game for both teams is who can start out hot. It's going to be whichever team can do it is going to have a great chance of winning this ball game. Just looking at the stats, since you were talking about Detroit's defense, over the last 5 games, I'll just go off of the kind of the streak that they're on, averaging giving up 142 yards on the ground and averaging giving up just to wide receivers 180 yards, which is quite a bit. Overall, giving up an average of 247 yards passing, which actually isn't all that bad. It's not too bad, but when you combine it with the rushing yards, it's not super great. The Vikings, once we get there, is actually a little worse. In I think both of those categories, but they're both kind of in
I
the
don't
same
believe
realm.
that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I believe the Vikings are giving up a little over 200 yards a game to just wide receivers. So
Ugh.
I know we're getting there, and maybe this is a good segue. But boy, oh boy, I am a daily fantasy football player. I also play some season long, and I think money is very well spent on Amon St. Brown and DJ Chark this weekend, and possibly even Goff.
So I want to mention the last time these two teams played, Andrew and Tony, that Justin Jefferson was held in check. He had 3 catches for 14 yards in the game. I don't think that's going to happen again. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think the Vikings are going to let that happen again. I think they're going to find ways to get him open, and I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on that. Do you think that the Lions can hold him down twice in one season? I have a tough time believing that JJ's not going to have a good game this week, whether it's in a loss or a win. Andrew, what do you think?
Yeah, I think. I mean, obviously, that was um, super impressive for the Lions defense to be able to limit Jefferson the way they did. But I kind of agree with you, Carson. Honestly, I think at the end of the day, that is extremely hard to do. And I was listening to our defensive coordinator because he had a press conference today, and he kind of said the same thing, where it's like Justin Jefferson's such a great player that it's like not every week are you going to be able to limit him. Like at some point, he's going to go off against you, even if you game plan against him. So I think I don't think I don't think that we're going to be able to lock him down the way we were week 1 or week 3 against you guys, especially now that you have someone like Hockenson, another weapon that we have to also um, divert our attention to as well. So, do I think it's going to be the same week 3 outcome? No, not at all. I think Jefferson is going to have plenty of opportunities to make a lot of plays, but I still do think that um, it's not going to be easy by any means. I think Okuda is a good physical cornerback, and I think that was one thing he did really good job of in that week 3 matchup was playing physical at the line, jamming Jefferson because Okuda is a bigger body cornerback. So if he can get his hands on Jefferson and slow him down at that initial at the line of scrimmage, I think that'll be beneficial. But by no means do I think that he's going to be limited to that performance that he had last time we played.
Tony?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I think that I think Jefferson. What we forget is he also had a lot of quote unquote penalty yards that game. You already alluded to
True.
that, Carson,
Yeah.
where he was able to stack up a decent amount of yardage off of pass interference or defensive holding calls. Obviously, that doesn't go in the stat column, but it is a factor. I think Jefferson should have a good game. I just think at the end of the day, Detroit, even with their woes, they're going to take the same approach that most of the other teams have taken with Jefferson, which is try to take him away and make everybody else beat you. And if they can do that effectively, it means that other guys have to step up, like an Adam Thielen, like a TJ Hockenson. I do think, there's some opportunity there for Dalvin Cook as well. So it's possible that we could see a lot of Dalvin too. It just depends on game script. And you could see Dalvin lining up in the slot, which is what we've certainly seen them do, especially over the last month.
Give it to me.
So,
Yes, give it to me. Dalvin in the
yeah.
slot. Let's go. Love it. Andrew, any other matchups that you are looking forward to on this side of the ball or that you think could be difference makers in the outcome of this game?
Yeah, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown, and this is someone that is really, and our offensive coordinator came out today and specifically said that he feels that Amon-Ra St. Brown has been playing like a top 10, even top 5 wide receiver over the last few weeks. And
He's been really
Amon-Ra
good.
St. Brown
Yeah.
always seems to kind of have a good game against you guys. I don't know why. Like I remember last year when he had the game-winning catch, but he is just such a hard player to defend against, especially because he plays in the slot, so it's hard to jam him at the line of scrimmage. The Lions do a really good job of moving him all around the field to keep the defense guessing. But Amon-Ra St. Brown over these last, really since he's gotten healthy, over these last 4 weeks now, if you go back and look at his numbers, like he's playing as good as any wide receiver in the NFL right now. And I think slowly but surely the national media is going to start giving him his credit. But he is a player that if I'm a Vikings fan, you guys really have to game plan against him and try to slow him down because he's Goff's favorite target. And Amon-Ra St. Brown, in my eyes, he's a top 10 wide receiver at this point. I don't think he gets the love that he deserves because he's a slot wide receiver. He's not lined up on the outside. But this is a player that always finds a way to get open no matter what defense you guys are running. He's going to find the soft spot in the zone. He's going to beat press man coverage. And he has such great hands. He's a tough player. And not only that, but he's also great in the run game too. So he's the one guy I think if there's a player that's going to carve up this Vikings defense, it's going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown. And no one has been able to stop him whatsoever, really, even going back to last year, his rookie year. he's just such an impressive player, and I think he's a guy I would keep my eyes on, and I think needs a little more respect because I view him as a top 10 wide receiver at this point.
Yeah, he is definitely one of the players I was thinking about coming into this matchup. And the thing is, if he lines up in the slot and the Vikings don't put a Patrick Peterson type of guy on him, he goes up against Chandon Sullivan. Last year, he went up against Mackenzie Alexander. So those are big reasons why he's probably. Those are big reasons why he's probably had good games. No, not trying to take away anything that he's done because he's a good player, but boy, those are not good matchups if you're a Vikings fan. Chandon Sullivan is graded as one of the worst slot corners and corners overall in the league this year, and Mac Alexander was the worst, I believe, last year. So those numbers right there just are would lead me to be not too excited about that matchup from a Vikings defense perspective. But yeah, it's
I'd love
not.
to
He's
see them
6
line
foot.
them up on. All I'll say is like if you line those players up against St. Brown, he's gonna have an amazing game again. Like
Yeah.
you really have to focus on St. Brown. He is, and again, like I said, he is a top 10 wide receiver at this point, and he needs to get more. He deserves more credit for what he's doing right now. He's so good.
Yeah.
Well, the one thing with him too is I'm not saying they're one and the same, but one of the parallels from an ex-Viking, um, he reminds me a little bit of Stefan Diggs in the way that he plays bigger than what he is. Because Amon-Ra St. Brown's 6 foot, but he plays bigger than 6 foot. And it's just, yeah, I mean, he's a tough player. He's a good wide receiver. I think he's going to he has the potential to have a big game this week. That whole receiving core.
I was
Oh
just
boy.
gonna say, yeah. Yeah, you got DJ Chark, who, of course, he had his revenge game last week. And then you got some of those other guys as well. Obviously, Jamison Williams coming back. Who are some of the other weapons you guys have on offense? I know I'm missing some. Obviously, you have DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams in the backfield. Who else do you guys have?
Yeah, I know this isn't a wide receiver or a tight end, but I really do believe that our offensive line is a weapon to an extent because
Yeah,
they dictate every single thing that we do, and our tackles and our left tackle Taylor Decker, Penei Sewell, they have been lights out this season, especially the last few weeks. And everything that we do is through our offensive line. They're extremely talented both in the run game and the pass game. They're physical. They're going to be able to push your defensive lineman back. We're going to be able to run that power running scheme. They also are extremely athletic, can get lateral as well for the zone running scheme as well. So I know it's not like a receiver, a tight end, but like this offensive line of the Lions is in my opinion top 5, and they're really hard to stop.
Yeah, if I were to have to guess how, and again, I just all speculation. I don't have any inside knowledge here, but if I were to have to guess, I think the way the Vikings are going to approach that Lions offense is they are going to basically drop back into coverage quite a bit. They're going to try to force the Lions, and I try here, big quotations, to beat them on the ground. They're going to try to just basically say, we're just going to drop back. We're going to play, probably a pretty heavy zone coverage or coverage scheme, and then see if they want to run. Because with the injuries that we've had in the secondary, and then the fact that we've also struggled to get home sometimes against decent offensive lines. I think they're going to almost concede. I don't want to say concede the run, but make or at least entice the Detroit Lions to try to beat them on the ground versus throwing the ball. Yeah, I mean, that's how I think it's going to play out. Now, whether it works or not, certainly to be seen. But if I were a betting man, that's how I would guess they're going to approach that.
And good news for Vikings fans. DeAndre Swift showed up on the injury report again this week. I think it was an ankle or maybe a shoulder.
I think
It was
Jamal
not an
Williams
illness.
too,
Oh, really? Yeah, he might have shown up too. So,
according to the one I saw today. And I think a few of your offensive linemen were limited. So hopefully for our sake, like you said, that offensive line is scary, and Tony and I have been privy to see, which I mean, maybe privy is not the right word, but we've been able to see the Vikings pass rush struggle at times over the last several weeks. So that does not give me optimism that the pass rush is going to get better against the Lions unless the Vikings start to bring some pressure. So, whoo boy, this could be interesting.
Yeah, I mean
Tony,
the key for the Lions is really going to be just scoring touchdowns. I know that seems like really dumb to say and super cliche, but the reason why I say that is as bad as this Vikings defense has been, outside of the Dallas game and the Philly game, and maybe, a few here and there, like, Buffalo was able to carve us up a bit. For most of the games, they've given up a lot of yardage, but they don't give up a lot of touchdowns. So if you look at like the touchdown allocation or allocations for this Vikings defense, it's pretty thin. We give up a lot of field goals because we give up so much yardage. But that's what keeps them in these games is that they're the kind of perfect example of the bend but not break defense. So the biggest thing for Detroit's going to be, yeah, they're going to, I guarantee, I mean, it would be a shocker if they didn't put up a lot of yards. The key is going to be putting in the end zone. Because that's where the Vikings are one of the best teams or best defenses in the league. Not that you say that in a sentence so much this year, but if their red zone defense is actually one of the best as far as keeping teams out of the end zone. So if they can get in the end zone and start to get 7, that's where things can get kind of gross for the Vikings ball club. Or again, on the flip side, if they keep them to field goals, it's what's going to let the Vikings hang around like they do every game.
well, Tony, you kind of read my mind with the whole kicking situation because I have already secured Michael Badgley as my kicker for this week on my fantasy team because the Vikings, according to Yahoo, give up the second most fantasy points to kickers. So that's why I picked up old Michael Badgley this week.
Oh, no surprise there. Good move.
But
Heck of a game last week.
Yeah, the money badger, right?
Yeah, the money badger.
He's at it again.
Finally have a kicker since Prater left.
Yeah, that's right. How do you feel? Okay, so here we go. Let's open up the Pandora's box of kicking. Vikings kicking situation has been iffy this year. How do you feel about Michael Badgley in your kicking situation?
Well, he hasn't given me any indication yet that he can't be the kicker of the future. So until he proves otherwise, I am more than happy with him as our kicker. He's been, again, the money badger for a reason. He's been money. He's kicked consistently from 40 yards out. He's hit a couple 50 plus yarders. So I am more than happy with him being our future kicker. And like I said, until he proves otherwise, there's no reason to think that he can't be the kicker of the future.
Yeah, it seems like it could end up being that the Vikings end up getting bit at some point this season, whether it's now or in the postseason, by a missed kick. And I don't want to say it'll be this week because I don't know if the Vikings will have the chance to get a game-winning kick in the end. It might have to be a game-winning touchdown if they do. But you always have that in the back of your head as a Vikings fan, don't you, Tony?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly been, plenty of history has been logged about our issues in the kicking game throughout the course of, again, the franchise history here. But,
how
this
to not
year,
miss a kick
yeah,
by the Minnesota Vikings, or how to miss a kick.
yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, ultimately, the Vikings will definitely. I mean, I think we've had a few games where we almost got bit by it, and again, we just kind of bailed our way out of it at the end. I'm sure it will come. Greg Joseph is, he's a guy that we brought in because we didn't believe in Daniel Carlson. That seemed to work out not very well for us. But he was a guy we had to get off the street. And, at the end of the day, he was there for the taking for a reason. And so we just haven't found an answer. I'm sure that will be addressed in the offseason. I think the weird thing with Greg Joseph is this, and as a Lions fan, Andrew, I didn't expect you to know this because why would you watch all these Vikings games to know this? But what the weird thing is with Greg Joseph, Andrew, is if we go into Sunday and he has to hit like a 48 or like a 45 yarder, he's probably going to be money. It's just for some reason, if it's like 35 yards, that seems to be an issue. It's like extra points and some of these field goals where you're going like, well, this should be like okay. He tends to just miss them, so it's a consistency issue more than it is like he doesn't have the leg or whatever. And obviously that's the kiss of death for a kicker is if you can't be somewhat consistent. That's just part of the job responsibilities. So we'll see what happens. At the end of the day, of course, I have all the faith in my ball club. I think we'll be able to score touchdowns. And I think the biggest thing is with these close games, these missed extra points, man, like that can be the difference. And it almost was in a few games. So, we'll just see what happens.
Yeah, the kicking game is a very underrated aspect when it comes to football. And when you have a kicker that's consistent all the time, you kind of forget. But then when you run into those inconsistencies, then you start to realize like, hey, this kicking game is very important when it comes to winning football games.
Yeah, Andrew, I don't expect you to know. Do you know the saga? And this is going to be just a short little bit, but do you know the saga of the 1998 Minnesota Vikings? I can give you the elevator pitch and how we're so snake bitten here.
Yeah, I do not know. That was the year I was born, so I wasn't watching the Vikings then, but I can tell you that.
I was 2, so if that gives you a clue.
Well, I was 48. No, I'm just kidding. So, no,
talking to a dinosaur here.
I was 12. Leave me alone. But this is the deal. So we're 15-1, arguably the best team in the NFL. I mean, we set the record that year for points scored per game. And overall points, obviously, scored throughout a regular season. Incredible offense. That was Randy Moss's rookie year. We had a kicker named Gary Anderson, did not miss one kick or one extra point the entire season. Into the playoffs, he continues.
He hasn't missed in 2 years.
Yeah, he continues to just be Mr. Perfect. He missed 2 field goals in the NFC Championship game, and one of them would have won us the game and to go to the Super Bowl. So there you have it. And ever since then, since then we've struggled. So.
And I know Andrew knows about the Blair Walsh miss. We don't even have to.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, old enough to know that one. Young enough to know that one. However you want to look at it.
Yeah, I was 2, so maybe I was listening to my dad yell, but I didn't know it at the time.
Oh, I was 12, so I can guarantee you I ripped my Transformer to shreds.
Yeah. But no, I do have pictures of me watching the Vikings when I was a little baby. So there definitely could have been me sitting there, but very, very upset because my dad was yelling. I don't know. No video proof or other type of proof, I guess. But I will say that the call, like, he hasn't missed in 2 years. Pat Summerall making the call. He hasn't missed in 2 years. He missed it. Just, in his very monotone Pat Summerall voice, like he hasn't missed it, but it's I mean, it would have been, it was a struggle. That's a good way to end it. But let's go ahead and get into the predictions, gentlemen. Let's see if we're all picking the Lions here. This is a Vikings show, believe it or not. But we are going to go ahead and give our predictions, and let's give our guest of honor the first swing at this one. Who do you got, and what do you got as a final score there, Andrew?
I think obviously you guys have had a lot of close games throughout the season, and I think that trend is going to continue heading into Detroit. I think the Lions, obviously, we blew out the Jaguars last week, but we've also kind of been in a lot of close games. So I think these are two teams that just ultimately, at the end of the day, it comes down to those, final few minutes in the fourth quarter for both teams. So I think that trend continues. It's going to be a close game that comes down to the fourth quarter. And kind of like what Tony said earlier too, I think it is going to be. I think the team that comes out hot is going to have the advantage as well. So ultimately, at the end of the day, I think the Detroit Lions, they're playing really well right now. They're a streaky team. They're hot. Momentum is on their side. It's a home game. The playoffs potentially are on the horizon. These young players are developing. Jared Goff is coming off his best game of his season this year. So everything is slowly but surely kind of trending in the direction of the Lions. So because of that, I'm going to have to take the Detroit Lions. But I think, again, it is going to be a close game. So I will say it's going to be 27-24. Lions find a way to win in the last couple minutes in the fourth quarter.
You're such a homer. Come on.
Hey, what answer did you expect me to give? I can't go with the Vikings here.
Do you work
Lions
for
guy.
the team? That was
I'm
what
I'm a Lions spy.
It was funny because I did a Saints preview with an actual Saints team reporter, and she says, well, I'm employed by the team, so I have to say that the team's going to win. It's like, all right, fair enough. I can't disagree with that. But Tony, go ahead. Who do you think wins this one, and a final score for you? What was your final score? Did you say 27-24?
Correct. Yeah, Lions, of course.
Tony.
Yeah, I mean, the Vikings fan in me, and you might not expect this, Andrew, but we are very cynical fans. The Vikings fan in me says we should lose this game, and to tell me, I'm telling myself don't get my hopes up. But the way this season has gone, and as much as it wouldn't surprise me to see the Lions win this game, I'm gonna go out on a limb, and I'm gonna predict that the Vikings win this game, and it's gonna be a high-scoring game. But I do think it's going to be a close game. I'm going to say Vikings win 34-28.
Okay. Wow. High scoring game.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm amazed how close you are to my prediction there, Tony. Except it's on the other side. Sorry. Lions. I don't want it to be true, but I have a feeling it's going to be. And I also think it's going to be a high-scoring game. And I'm going to say 33-29. I don't know if there's been a final score. I'm guessing there's been a final score with that, but maybe a little scoreagami, but odd score regardless. But Vikings fall in Detroit 33-29, a last-minute drive to try and win it, and the Lions thwart
Actually, Carson,
the Vikings' efforts.
Carson, I'm going to modify my game prediction. I'm going to say it's going to be Lions 33.
Whoa.
I'm going to say it's Lions 33, Vikings 116. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Wow.
Historic day for sure. Then
it is. Yeah.
Sheesh.
Yeah.
I think we maybe overstated the Lions' defense. Apparently.
Yeah. Dalvin's gonna run for 460 yards.
No. Kirk's gonna throw for 1,000, and Jefferson's gonna have 650 of them.
I'll have to turn my fan card in if that actually would happen.
No. I think it's gonna be a close game. All kidding aside, I'm excited for Sunday. It is gonna be, I think, a heavyweight bout with these offenses. I don't think we see a lot of defense, but it should be a ton of fun. And as a Vikings fan, this is what I hope. I hope that of course that the Vikings win. It clinches the division, obviously, with the win. But then going forward, I really mean this. I hope to see the Lions just go on a tear the rest of the year. I think it'd be super cool. Just lose Sunday, but then I'd love to see you guys just run the table after that because you guys have such a fun ball club.
Would rather have that than the Packers run the table, that's for sure.
Oh yeah, I hope they lose every game.
That is correct.
We can find common ground there at the very least.
That's right. That's right. Very good. Well, everybody, we appreciate you tuning in, and we appreciate you hopefully going to our YouTube channel and subscribing to help us get to the quest of 100 subscribers. We are 7 away. We need to go to Vegas and get a 7 here, Tony. So we're getting there. We're very close, on the precipice, if you will, of getting to 100 subscribers. But hey, Andrew, before we get off here, I want to thank you for coming on and give you an opportunity to tell about your platform.
Yeah, well, thanks again, Carson and Tony, for having me on. Always enjoy talking about Lions football, and it's going to be a fun one for sure. So for those listening, you can follow me at Lions Fan Report on Twitter. That's where I do most of my content. So if you're a Lions fan or just an NFL fan and want to learn more about the Lions, feel free to reach out to me there. DMs are always open if you have any questions. So again, appreciate you having me on the show, and go Lions.
Oh, whoa! We didn't say you could say that. now we need you to pay us back by saying Skol. No, just kidding. No. We won't make you do it. We won't make you do it. But no, hey man, we always appreciate it. And looking forward to this game, and maybe we'll have to have you on our post game. I don't know if you got plans post game, but maybe we'll have to get you on after the game to give us your thoughts while we Viking fans are very displeased with the outcome.
Yeah, especially I'm more than happy to chat for in anticipation of the Lions victory Monday for sure.
There you go. There you go.
There you go. All right. Very well. Thank you, everybody, again for being here. And as always, Skol.
Skol.